Hello, can you hear me?
Good morning. I can hear you.
Good morning, nice to see you.
Hang on, let me turn up my volume. I just plugged in a new camera and some ports, and I was trying to get my headphones to work too, and it doesn't like them.
No problem.
So, Alex, behind me, I'm sorry my headphones don't work. You're going to listen to a Zoom meeting, whether you like it or not. Okay.
All right, I think Heidi's here. If your camera's off, it doesn't pop up on the screen anymore. Um, but Heidi, if you don't mind, I made you co-host. Can you admit people that enter the waiting room?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you so much. We might as well get started since it's 9. I wanted to welcome everyone to our Santa Clara River Watershed Committee meeting. As you know, general update, we're obviously not able to acquire the United Water Conference Room for this meeting, so I wanted to thank you all for being here over Zoom. On our agenda, we have the introductions and general updates. We'll also be hearing from Jody Schweitzer from the Farm Bureau, and then some ag program updates from VCRCD. But to start off the meeting, I wanted to go around and have people do some introductions. Please share your name, your organization, and also in light of many of the changes in the federal policies, if you're comfortable sharing how those changes have impacted any projects you're working on that might be pertinent to the Santa Clara River watershed. Maybe we'll spend maybe about 10 minutes doing this, give or take. I'll start. I'm Lauren from Ventura County RCD, and believe it or not, most of our work hasn't been super impacted, but I think Heidi can speak to some small grants potentially.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. I'm Heidi Ortloff. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the VCRCD. And for a while, we weren't sure if some of our match funding that just covered supplies for one of our programs was impacted. And it was for like a week, and then we got cleared to continue using the funds. So pretty minimal on our end.
Thanks, Heidi. Jody, you can go next since I see your screen.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jody Schweitzer, Water Program Director with the Farm Bureau of Ventura County. And I'll be sharing lots of updates in my talk in a little bit here.
Thanks. What about Amanda? Are you here? Amanda Begley?
Yes, hello everyone. Amanda Begley with Tree People. I also work in LA County's Safe Clean Water Program as the Santa Clara River Watershed Coordinator. Tree People has been impacted by some of the stuff happening at the federal government, but because my work is focused on an LA County tax measure, my specific work, not so much, but the work in the upper watershed in the Angeles National Forest has been impacted with staffing changes and funding cuts and the like. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Let's see, what about Ollie from SCV Water?
Hi everyone, I'm Ali Al Hassan. I'm the Director of Water Resources for the agency. Good to see you, everyone.
Yeah, good to see you too. Chuck Carter, you're here.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Chuck Carter. I'm a member of the Channel Islands Naturalist Corps and volunteer coordinator for the Clean Water Team.
Great, thanks for being here. Oh, I wish I could remember their name, but Cycle Zealot is the name on here. Okay, let's hear from Elizabeth Burns.
Hi, Elizabeth Burns from Southern Steelhead Coalition. We have been affected by some of the changes in the federal because basically because we have a lot of different partnerships with a lot of different organizations, agencies, local governments. So that all affects them and that all affects us as part of the coalition because they are important members of our coalition.
Heather from the city of Oxnard.
Yep, Heather, City of Oxnard, no known impacts.
Thank you. Jennifer Lancaster.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Lancaster, Manager of Water Resources with Cayugas Municipal Water District. And so far, we haven't had too much impact. We did have a rather large BOR grant that we were worried about in the beginning, but it seems like it has been reinstated and it's still slated for us. So that's great news and hopefully it stays that way.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kendall Lucen.
Hi, yes, sorry, I don't have my camera working today, but my name is Kendall Lucene. I've participated on a few of these when it doesn't conflict with other meetings. I'm the Installation Community Plans and Liaison Officer for Naval Base Ventura County. So essentially urban interface, more simpler of a title. Happy to be here and yeah, I've extended this meeting series to a couple of our ecologists and biologists here at the Naval Base. Some of you probably have already worked with in the past. With regards to the federal, let's call it DOGE, if you will, we've seen some impacts just with personnel turnover, and that's seems to be growing. But still here, kicking, screaming, and loving it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I know it's hard for you to join over Zoom, so thank you. G. Nagels, not sure the first name on that.
Good morning. Hi, I'm from Balance to Thrive. I am a master's in biotechnology and bioinformatics, as well as master's in business and education with a civil engineering background. So I live near the Santa Clara River. I really appreciate the water that's been allowed to flow more over the last few years. And I know that there's migratory waterfowl that use the Santa Clara River when it's running. I know that there are endemic species that use the Santa Clara River when it's running. And I know there's people that benefit from that as well. So I really appreciate everyone's effort to keep the Santa Clara River running with surface water as long as possible during the year. And I'm very interested in beaver dam analog installation, as well as restoring beaver to the Santa Clara River. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And Julie Clark. Oh, Julie, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm Julie Clark with Ventura offices of University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And we don't have a clear picture yet about any federal implications. We know for sure they've affected a lot of our agricultural grants, natural resource management programs, especially with fire, our ability to plan for existing grants and future grants, as well as we've had direct requests to change some of our university policies. So it's a dynamic situation that we're trying to assess at the local on up to the state levels.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Julie. Laura Schellenberger.
Good morning, everyone. I don't have any impacts I've experienced from federal funding changes in this current administration. I do want to remind everyone that there is a watershed, a Ventura River Watershed Resilience Forum coming up on April 30th. I know it's been shared out through the Ventura River Watershed Council email list, and I believe it's probably been shared also with the Santa Clara group. But for those of you that work in the Ventura River Watershed, please, I recommend you check that out and consider RSVPing for that event. So I'm sorry if there was another agenda item for updates, but thought I'd just take that opportunity now. So thank you.
No, I think that's perfect. It's April 30th, right? From 3 to 5.
Right.
Just to put it on
3
the
to
date on
5:30.
everyone's mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's from 3 to 5:30. It's at Camp Arnez, and we can put the registration link in the chat too.
Cool, thank you.
Do you want me to put the link in the chat, Laura, or do you have it up already?
That would be perfect. Thank you, Heidi, if you do it.
Awesome. Myra Molina.
Hi, I'm Myra Molina. I'm with CDFW, Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm a senior environmental scientist specialist, and this is my first time being in this meeting. I'm not really sure if there's other CDFW folks on here, but yeah, hello.
Thanks for
CDFW has joined before, so I don't know if not regularly, but I think they were in our last meeting, and so maybe you'll see some of your coworkers. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I'm trying to figure out who forwarded me this meeting, but I'm gonna join for probably half of it because I have a meeting conflict later. Thanks.
Thank you. Mohammed Hassan. Let's go to Peter Schellenberger.
Good morning. My name is Peter Schellenberger. I work for the City of Ventura Public Works Department. I oversee our stormwater compliance program and our hazardous waste or household hazardous waste program. In terms of the federal government changes or anything that's going on right now, no change to the city in terms of our obligations under the Clean Water Act, because they are created locally. I do think the Supreme Court ruling regarding the Clean Water Act last month will probably impact all permitting in the state moving forward. Heidi or Jody, you might talk about that, but you might not. But in terms of what I do and how it relates to the Santa Clara River, urban discharges in wet weather impact water quality, also in dry weather, but a lot of the time municipal agencies aren't discharging in dry weather, or it's not actually reaching the main stem of the river. It just disappears as soon as it hits the sand in the Santa Clara or the Ventura rivers. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Naveen.
Good morning. Please call me Dino. That's typically what I go by, and I change in here. City of Oxnard, Source Control, along with Heather is joining us as well. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Phil McGrath.
Hello, everyone. Phil McGrath Family Farms. Just interested in this group's mission and the topics today. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining.
Sure.
Rick from SCV Water.
Morning, everyone. Rick Vasilopoulos. I'm a water resources planner here at SCV Water and also the chair of our IRWIM for the upper Santa Clara River. Nice to see everyone.
Good for you. Sarah Mulder.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sarah Mulder. I'm the Water Resources Manager for City of Ventura. As far as federal impacts, so far most of our large-scale funding has been secure, so that's been positive. I know that we're changing the wording in active applications going in for federal grants, so that's been a bit of a shift. And some of our smaller scale federal grants through reclamation and EPA were subject to DOJ review. One's okay, one's still pending. So it's mostly funding impacts. TBD though.
I think there's 3 people left. Adriana Soval, Bert Handy, and David Lack. You guys can go and then we'll get started.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, thank you. I'm Adriana Stovall. I'm a senior watershed scientist with Rincon Consultants and Watershed Sciences and Earth and Environmental Systems Department. I manage a variety of TMDL monitoring and reporting programs in the county, including for the Santa Clara River. So happy to be here. Rincon is assessing internally which of our clients' projects had federal funding and are going to be impacted. And luckily, it's not many, but there are some considerations and adaptations that we're making internally. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Bert.
Bert Handy, citizen of Ventura, just monitoring and listening to the activities today.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. David Lack, Stormwater Resources Manager with Ventura County Public Works Agency, Watershed Protection, and I help coordinate the activities of the countywide stormwater program, which includes all 10 cities, the county, and the Watershed Protection District. And primarily, we do the water quality monitoring for the MS4 permit, manage kind of countywide special projects, the public outreach efforts, and kind of the go-between between the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board and the permittees here in Ventura County. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I think that is everybody. If not, feel free to chime in. Okay, Jody, our first presentation is from the Farm Bureau. Feel free to start sharing your screen when you're ready.
Okay. There we go. Hey, good morning, everybody. I was looking back to see when the last time that I had talked to this group was, and I think it's been a couple of years. There's been some big changes in the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, and this is the regulatory program that focuses on water quality for agriculture. So I wanted to give a little bit of a background, kind of an introduction to what that program is for the folks in the meeting who aren't as familiar. Then I'm going to talk about what we do on behalf of VCALG. And so VCALG is an acronym that stands for the Ventura County Agricultural Irrigated Lands Group. And I'll talk about what we do, the monitoring program that we're implementing within the Santa Clara River. And I'm going to keep my talk kind of focused on both the Irrigated Lands program, but Santa Clara River watershed specifically. And then go over some water quality monitoring results from the Santa Clara River watershed. And then I'm going to talk about some of the 2 key updates that were adopted in the new ag order that was adopted in the end of 2023. So these new requirements are TMDL driven requirements. So we'll talk about what that is. And then this requirement for essentially tracking and reporting of nitrogen and irrigation for each crop. And then I can answer any questions that kind of come out of this talk as well. And if any questions pop up in the chat, Lauren, feel free to interrupt me if it's something that needs to be answered right then. So a quick background of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. This is overseen at the state level by the State Water Resources Control Board. And then each of the 9 regions in California, they administer that program within their region. And they adopt a regulatory order that is also specific to that region. So sometimes these regulatory orders are called conditional ag waivers. Sometimes they're called an ag order or a WDR, waste discharge requirements. Regardless of the actual type, the mechanism of that regulatory order, there's a lot of common elements from region to region. So some of those are things like the regulatory program applies to growers who irrigate a commercial crop. So if you're irrigating and you're selling it commercially, you are subject to this regulatory program. And what the regulatory program regulates is water that discharges into surface water. So this could be irrigation tailwater that comes off during an irrigation event, or it could be stormwater that's coming off of a field during a rain event, as well as what leaches into groundwater. So what's going, below the root zone of a crop and infiltrating into our groundwater aquifers. And the goals of this regulatory program are to control and prevent contaminants to protect the beneficial uses of those surface water bodies and groundwater resources. And another common element that applies in all of the 9 regions of the state is that growers can have essentially 2 pathways to comply with this regulatory program. They can do it individually, which means that they're going to be doing the sampling off of their farm or ranch. They're going to be doing the analysis, all of the reporting directly with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, or they can join a third-party coalition that does it as a collective group. So this is the procedure or process that the vast majority of growers choose. And in Ventura County, the Farm Bureau of Ventura County is the administrator of that group, and it's called VCALG, the Ventura County Agricultural Irrigated Lands Group. And it's been in place since 2006. And one thing that I always stress to clarify, especially when I'm talking with different agencies, is that while we are the coalition that is implementing this regulatory program, we are not enforcement. That is the Regional Water Quality Control Board's role in this. What VCALG does is we help growers and landowners of agricultural lands meet the compliance requirements under the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. So we're kind of the intermediary between growers and the regulators. The VCALG program is guided by a 17-member steering committee. And so this is made up of growers who operate in each of the 3 primary watersheds of Ventura County, also a variety of crop commodity representation, but also some water agencies and other agricultural stakeholder groups. It's funded, VCALG is funded by a per acreage assessment. So growers enroll in the program, and then depending on the number of acres that they are producing on, they would pay an assessment on that acreage. And that's what funds all of the work that, that we do on behalf of those enrolled growers. So our current enrollment numbers are close to 79,000 irrigated acres in Ventura County. And that accounts for about 89% of the estimated irrigated acreage in the county, and 1,350 landowners and growers, which accounts for about 74% of the landowners in the county. The discrepancy between those 2 numbers tells you that we have a larger number of landowners that are operating on a smaller kind of acreage who are not enrolled in the program. So for the most part, these are kind of your small operations, potentially your ranchettes, which most people would consider hobby growers, but if you're still selling it commercially, you're subject to this regulatory program. And then the responsibilities of VCALG, we manage the group, we manage the enrollment, all of the administrative needs behind that. We do all of the water quality monitoring throughout the county, and then also conduct special studies when those are required. We develop the water quality reports and plans that are required multiple times every year. And then most importantly, we do the education and outreach for enrolled growers. So we are helping them understand this really complicated, becoming more complicated regulatory program and what they need to do in order to comply. And this is kind of a quick progression of the irrigated lands regulatory program here in our region. So it was first established in 2005. So we're, 20 years into this now. And it started with conditional waivers, conditional ag waivers, which is a conditional waiver of waste discharge requirements for irrigated land. So the waiver part of it was more in a reporting or administrative requirement. It was the conditions of that regulatory order that specified all of the requirements. So the early conditional waiver terms are really about establishing this monitoring framework, establishing the coalition in and of itself. And then every 5 years, these conditional waivers are required to be renewed and adopted again. So every 5 years roundabouts, you would get a new conditional waiver, which would carry forward the requirements of the preceding conditional waiver and then add additional requirements. So in 2010, all of the TMDLs that agriculture was listed as a responsible party for were incorporated into the conditional waiver, which gave it an enforcement mechanism. And then in 2016, when the third conditional waiver was adopted, there were quite a few new requirements added into that. So there was an increased focus on groundwater. There were source investigation studies required in areas where there were increasing trends in water quality constituents. And there were only a few areas where we had those. There were compliance dates for TMDLs. I'm going to talk about why that was really significant. And then there were nitrogen management plan requirements for growers who operated in certain watersheds that had exceedances for nutrients. And then in September of 2023, an ag order was adopted. The significance here is that an ag order is a long-term regulatory order, so it doesn't have to be renewed and reconsidered every 5 years. It stays in place until the regional board decides that something in that needs to change. And the two big requirements that were added into the ag order, and these are what I'm going to talk about in a little bit here, are the statewide precedential nitrogen management tracking and reporting requirements, and then TMDL driven requirements, which carry pretty significant consequences as those deadlines come due. So we'll talk a little bit about our monitoring program, where we're monitoring, what we're seeing. This is a snapshot here of the entire county, and you can see each icon here indicates a VCALG monitoring site. So the sites in green are our, call it our monitoring program and TMDL compliance evaluation sites. The sites in this kind of purple color are a background site, so an area where we weren't able to exclude a background contributing source. Maybe it's coming from an MS4 connection into an ag drain, or it's coming from a different background source that we need to see what is then coming and commingling with the agricultural water that we're sampling. So VCALG is out here sampling at each of these 20 monitoring sites 4 times a year, 2 times during wet weather, 2 times during dry weather a year, sometimes more frequently if the TMDL necessitates that. And then we have the entire county kind of carved up into what we call responsibility areas. So we've got these RA names and then a corresponding number. And what that essentially does is what we see at each monitoring site is then considered to be representative of the area in the larger responsibility area. I'm going to map here that kind of, I'll go back a quick second. So I'm going to focus in on this area right here. We call the Bardsdale responsibility area. It's kind of in between Santa Paula and Fillmore, south of the river. So this area is outlined in red. That's the responsibility area. Our monitoring site is here, right off of Bardsdale Avenue. And then this area shaded in blue is the drainage area to that monitoring site. So we can't monitor every acre of agriculture in the county. We have this representative monitoring program in lieu of that. So what we see at this monitoring site is considered to be representative of the entire area outlined in red here, not just the area draining to it. So the crop type distribution within those drainage areas are selected, I would kind of switch that. The monitoring site is selected so that the drainage area to it is representative in crop type patterns of the larger area. So if we're looking at an area that has a lot of row crops, then the drainage area to our monitoring site should be primarily row crops. And then here's a snapshot of the entire watershed. So Santa Clara River watershed, we've got a little more than 31,000 irrigated acres of crop production. We have 470 growers who are enrolled in VCALD, and that accounts for about 93% of the irrigated acreage in the watershed. So pretty good enrollment numbers there. And then the crop distribution, we're looking at 70% orchards. And so this is going to be both avocado and citrus primarily. And then 12% row crops, 8% strawberries, 5% kind of a mix of anything else, and then some nursery flower and a little bit of sod as well. And so you can see here our monitoring sites. We have what are essentially 4 monitoring sites within the watershed itself. Here at Tapo Canyon, Boulder Creek, Bardsdale Avenue, Ellsworth, Bronca. And we do have a site here at Oxnard Center right off of Harbor Boulevard, which is representing both some acreage that drains to McGrath Lake, but some of this acreage also drains to the Santa Clara River. And here are those 4 main monitoring sites that I had noted. So our site here at Ellsworth Bronca, we have what it looks like in wet weather, what it looks like here in dry weather. Boulder Creek, right at Highway 126, we've got a wet weather view and a dry weather view. Bardsdale Avenue, just upstream of the confluence with the Santa Clara River, so wet weather, dry weather. This is a site that during dry weather is primarily dry. And then Tapo Canyon Creek we have, so wet weather, and then dry weather, it's still some flow. And then what we're analyzing for at each of these sites includes this long list of constituents. So we've got our general field measurements, our water quality constituents, a lot of your TDS, salts, nutrients. So nutrients primarily focused on nitrate, total nitrogen, ammonia, phosphorus, pesticides. So pesticides are broken up into kind of suites of pesticides. We've got the organochlorine or the OC pesticides. Those are legacy pesticides, things like DDT that haven't been used in decades, but are still persistent in the environment as they break down. Organophosphorus pesticides, pyrethroid pesticides, and then new in the ag order was the requirement to add the neonicotinoid suite of pesticides as well. So this is something that we are adding now. And then metals, and we're talking about metals as far as agricultural discharge goes. We're focusing mainly on dissolved copper, trash, bacteria, and aquatic chronic toxicity. So this is a kind of a snapshot overview of where we have kind of the categories of exceedances at these monitoring sites in the Santa Clara River. So we're meeting the benchmarks for quite a few of those categories. These are the categories where we are exceeding them once or more. So bacteria frequently exceed it during dry weather, frequently exceed it during wet weather. Anybody who implements water quality monitoring program knows that bacteria is a challenge for meeting those water quality benchmarks. Salts. So dry weather is few or occasional exceedances, and wet weather, frequent exceedances. So that's mainly chlorides. For the OC pesticides, so again, we're talking things like DDT or the breakdown products, which would be DDE or DDD, and chloridane. another legacy pesticide that hasn't been used for decades, but still persistent in the environment. Few or very occasional dry weather exceedances, but wet weather frequently see exceedances. The organophosphorus and pyrethroid pesticides, talking specifically about bifenthrin, no dry weather exceedances, but wet weather exceedances. Nutrients, talking specifically about nitrates, few or very occasional dry weather exceedances, but frequent wet weather exceedances. So the big takeaway here is, dry weather flows are meeting the majority of those water quality benchmarks. Wet weather is where the challenge is. And I'll go over a few kind of plot graphs here of those results. So here, this is looking at DDE. We didn't have any dry weather DDT exceedances, but we did have a few for DDE. And this is looking at the Ellsworth-Barranca monitoring site. So dry weather on the left, wet weather on the right. And you can see where we have the X's means not sampled because of no flow, which is great. Or non-detect for a triangle. So we have quite a few non-detects, some exceedances. Something to note here is what this benchmark is. So we're looking at micrograms per liter, like fractions of micrograms per liter, to the point where it's actually in less than 1 nanogram per liter. So we're looking at parts per trillion as the benchmark for DDT, which is really low. And DDT is a chemical that binds to soil. So that's why we're seeing more exceedances with a higher range here on the graph in wet weather. It binds to soil. When that soil moves in a high rain event, that's when we're seeing that in the water quality monitoring. And then nutrients. So here, again, on the left, we've got dry weather. On the right, we've got wet weather. This is our Bardsdale Avenue site. The load allocation for the nutrients TMDL is 10 milligrams per liter, nitrate as nitrogen, which is also the drinking water standard. So in dry weather, we have been below this standard, which is great. In wet weather over here, we see the majority of samples are meeting that water quality standard with just 2 exceedances. And the time scale of these graphs also are looking back to 2007 or 2008. So we're looking at a long snapshot of time here. The good story about nutrients in the Santa Clara River is that it was listed on the 303D list of impaired water bodies for nutrients, has since been delisted. So that means the Santa Clara River is achieving those water quality benchmarks driven by the beneficial uses and was delisted. And then bacteria. So on this plot, we've got wet and dry weather bacteria results. Again, bacteria, especially in wet weather, these higher concentrations are likely wet weather bacteria results.
Jody, I had a quick question. Do you, I guess, do you know off the top of your head when it was delisted? And
I do not know. Yeah, I don't know if any of the other stormwater people know.
Okay, yeah.
Last couple of years, I want to say. I don't know when it wasn't in this most recent listing cycle. It would have been prior to that. So I don't know,
Okay.
6 years before.
Mm-hmm. And then I also was curious if this, maybe you talked about it, maybe I missed it, but are these monitoring sites on tributaries or the main stem? And then
Oh, great question. Yeah, I didn't really explain that too much when I was talking through how VCALG chooses their monitoring sites. So VCALG is monitoring in agricultural drainages or tributaries that are only draining agricultural land. So where we site our monitoring sites are only going to be draining agricultural land, and we would carefully select those locations so that we're not getting interference from any other land type drainage or POTW influence or MS4, anything else. So what we're seeing here is attributed from agricultural lands. And in those cases where we weren't able to exclude those other sources, we'll add a background site so that we can kind of subtract that out. We do some what we call receiving water monitoring, but those aren't the results that I'm showing here. That's just kind of TMDL implementation to do that receiving water monitoring.
Thank you. Thanks for answering.
And I think this is the last graph I have here. So by Fenthrin, again, we're looking at micrograms per liter and fractions of micrograms per liter. So we're looking at essentially nanograms here, parts per trillion, and quite a few non-detects, but also some detections. So bifenthrin is more of a wet weather concern. So we don't have a chart here for dry weather because we don't have any exceedances for that. So what do we do with this data that we're collecting when we see that there are exceedances at monitoring sites? What happens next? So the basis of the ag order and also the preceding conditional waivers was focused on this iterative process for monitoring. The standard is for growers to implement management practices on their farms to the degree necessary to meet standard water quality benchmarks. And VCALG provides recommendations about, if we're seeing a particular type of exceedance, what type of management practice would mitigate that. And then we'll refer them to technical service providers like the RCD or the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service to help do a farm-specific assessment and make some specific recommendations. But ultimately, the growers would decide what's going to work best for their individual farm or ranch, because every farm is different, every commodity type is different, the water quality exceedances are different in different areas. So it really does need to be a farm-tailored approach. And the way this iterative process works is we start here with sampling. So we're characterizing the water quality conditions, and that's done through VCALG's monitoring. And then VCALG would develop a water quality management plan. So we'd say, here are the types of water quality constituents that we're seeing exceedances for. These are the management practices that are going to be needed to mitigate those exceedances and develop a plan for percentage of implementation in certain areas. Then we do education and outreach. So we're doing workshops for growers or putting together kind of compliance summary handouts to make responsibility area specific recommendations so that we can say, if you are in the Arroyo Simi responsibility area, we know we have exceedances for legacy pesticides maybe, and because those move with sediment, the recommendations would be focusing on erosion and sediment control measures on your farm or ranch. And then we would survey all of the growers enrolled in VCALG to ask on a parcel level what types of management practices they're implementing and what degree they're implementing them. And then we update the water quality management plan. So we have updated monitoring results all the time because we're continuing sampling. When we have those surveys back from growers, we're able to see where do we continue to have water quality exceedances and what level of implementation are growers doing right now. And then the updated water quality management plan would say what more needs to be done in order to meet water quality benchmarks in the areas where we're still seeing some issues. But there are backstops to that iterative process. And that's the significant change that came with the new ag order that was adopted at the end of 2023. So those backstops take the form of these TMDL driven requirements. So for those not familiar with what a TMDL is, TMDL stands for total maximum daily load. And it's essentially a watershed specific plan to restore the beneficial use of an impaired water body. So when a water body is listed as impaired for any particular constituent, then the Regional Water Quality Control Board will develop a total maximum daily load for that. And they incorporate these TMDLs into their existing regulatory orders. So they'll be incorporated into the ag order for agriculture or the MS4 permit for municipal discharges or into the POTW's permit for wastewater treatment plants, et cetera. And the TMDLs themselves are going to look at the source types that are discharging the constituent of concern to that water body. So if we're talking nutrients, the TMDL is going to look at each source type, like land use type, that's contributing nutrients to the water body, and they would assign an allocation to that. So usually that allocation, well, maybe not usually, sometimes the allocation will come in the form of a concentration, sometimes it'll come in the form of an actual load, so pounds per day, for instance. And then the TMDLs have to be incorporated into those permits in order to be enforceable, because before they're incorporated into a permit, they are just a plan. They don't have an enforcement mechanism. Once they are incorporated, then it is an enforceable requirement. And then load allocations must be met by the compliant state that's stipulated. So this is kind of a lot on this slide here, but what we have is a list of every TMDL of which agriculture is a responsible party in Ventura County. So first takeaway here is that this is a long list. There's a lot of TMDLs that apply in Ventura County, and there's some history behind that. And then in the conditional waiver, there were compliant states that were established in 2016. However, when the ag order was adopted in 2023, some of these compliant states changed. And they changed due to some, legal legal issues that had come from a different irrigated lands regulatory program in the central coast region of the state, where the state board had weighed in saying that the way that the regional board had initially changed some dates wasn't the proper way to do it. And when our regional board reviewed that legal finding, they said, well, we actually did the same thing quite a while ago. So they had to revert back to some TMDL listed dates from a ways prior. So what this did is, for certain areas that might have had, like the Cayugas Creek nitrogen compounds TMDL, which originally wasn't going to come due until October of this year, the date reverted back to 2010, and a few other instances where those dates reverted back quite a while. Because this ag order was adopted in 2023, there wasn't much kind of substantive consequence because of these date revisions, because those compliant states would have already come due anyways. Regardless, the other thing I just want you to take away from this slide is the dates themselves. So the majority of these dates have already come due, with very few exceptions. The exceptions would be wet weather bacteria, which for the Santa Clara River watershed won't come due until 2029. Dry weather bacteria came due recently in March of 2023. And then for the Cayugas Creek watershed, the OC pesticide and PCB TMDL won't be coming due until 2026. So I want to show where these TMDLs apply within, I'm focusing just on the Santa Clara River watershed. And then I'll talk about what the consequence of these TMDLs mean for agriculture. So in the Santa Clara River watershed, we've got the Santa Clara River nitrogen compounds TMDL. So even though the Santa Clara River watershed was delisted from the 303D list for nitrogen impacts, the TMDL remains. And that is something that the regional board has discretion on, where even if a water body is delisted from the 303D list, the regional board can choose to maintain that TMDL as a kind of an extra protective layer for water quality for a region. So that's the choice they made here. So everywhere you see in red is where the nitrogen TMDL applies. So it applies to the entire watershed. And then these other TMDLs apply to land that is draining to certain reaches in the watershed. So next we have the Santa Clara River bacteria TMDL. So this applies in reach 3 and reach 5 of the Santa Clara River. And then the upper Santa Clara River chloride TMDL here in yellow, which applies to reach 5 and above. So only a small portion of Ventura County, this black line here indicates the county line, only a small portion of Ventura County is within that TMDL area. And then last, we have the Santa Clara River Estuary Toxaphene TMDL, which is outlined in yellow down here in the lower portion of the watershed. So growers in this area in orange, they have the nitrogen compounds TMDL and the bacteria TMDL that would apply. These growers in red, they only have the nitrogen compounds TMDL that applies. These growers here in yellow have the nitrogen, the bacteria, and the upper Santa Clara River fluoride TMDL. You kind of get there's this layering effect. And this layering effect is what was the basis of drawing responsibility areas for VCALG, so that we could say every acre of agricultural land within a responsibility area has the exact same TMDLs that apply within it. So in the ag order, the TMDL requirements changed really significantly. So there were technically TMDL requirements in the 2016 conditional waiver that are somewhat similar to what they are now, but they weren't able to be implemented for a couple of reasons. First, many of those TMDL compliance dates hadn't come due until just recently. So they weren't due yet. There was nothing that could have been triggered. And this was before those dates reverted back to, 15 years ago. The requirements were tied to the encompassing and adjacent HUC 12 subwatershed rather than TMDL boundaries. So they weren't based on the TMDL, the area draining to the TMDL listed water body. They were instead tied to HUC 12 subwatersheds, which didn't always align with the area draining to the water body in the TMDL. And most importantly, it was uncertain how and where the requirements applied because we didn't have maps for the area draining to a TMDL listed water body. Many of the times the TMDL itself would include a narrative description of land draining to this reach, but because there wasn't a kind of a GIS-based map in order to base identifying the land area subject to these requirements on, they weren't able to actually be implemented. So the new requirements in the ag order were changed to address some of these challenges. So first, they were changed to apply within TMDL boundaries. So there's more kind of a legally defensible basis for implementing these requirements. And many of those boundaries were just recently determined. So after the ag order was adopted, we worked really closely with the regional board to make sure that all of these areas were discreetly mapped out so that we could clearly say whether a particular farm or ranch was in a TMDL area or not. And as I mentioned, these were the basis of those responsibility areas. And then the compliance dates changed, which I also already mentioned. But most significantly is that the compliance pathways also changed. So under the ag order, this is kind of the TMDL driven requirement synopsis here, is following a water quality exceedance at VCALG's representative monitoring site, growers in the area being represented by that monitoring site, so this would be the responsibility area, they would now be subject to discharge limitations for the constituent that exceeded. And they would be required to select one of the following compliance pathways. They can comply through track 1, which is individual monitoring. So that means the grower would submit a field-specific monitoring and reporting plan for edge of field sampling from their farm or ranch. Sampling would be initiated the following wet and or dry season, and it would have to continue until there is a minimum of 2 years with no exceedances of the load allocation. The results would be reported every year by the grower to the regional board. And then even after you have 2 years of no exceedance, resampling would have to be done every 5 years to ensure that discharge from the farm or ranch continues to meet the load allocation. Added into the ag order is track 2, which is an opt-in compliance pathway. And so this is an implementation focused pathway where a grower would work with a technical service provider, which could be the Ventura County RCD or NRCS, or what they call equivalent professional expert. So like a consultancy or an environmental engineer, agricultural engineer, somebody who has the credentials to make these recommendations. They would do an assessment of the the farm or ranch with that technical service provider, and then they would develop a management practice plan. And that management practice plan gets submitted to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They review and approve that plan, and then the grower would implement that according to the timeline specified. And then the regional board is going to continue to review VCALG's monitoring and reporting. And if the site representing that area doesn't improve after a period of at least 2 years, if it's not improving, then those growers who choose track 2 could be asked to update or revise their plans to include additional management practices to mitigate that exceeding constituent. And this particular requirement was just recently triggered for some large areas in Ventura County. So everywhere you see highlighted in red is an area where there was exceedance of a load allocation after a compliance date. The majority of these were nitrate based. This area right here draining to the McGrath Lake subwatershed was a legacy pesticide base. And we also had some selenium exceedances. And this chart right here just tells you the number of responsibility areas that triggered these requirements, and then the number of landowners and growers who were affected by them. So we've got close to 400 landowners and growers who received these notifications. These smaller areas received notifications last year, so they are kind of already on the pathway to implementing these requirements. These larger areas right here, these folks just received their notification in February. And once they receive a notification that they're now subject to discharge limitations, they have 2 months to decide whether they want to comply through track 1 or track 2. And that 2-month deadline actually falls today. So I've got my phone on mute just for this hour, and then I'm sure I'll be taking many additional calls as it's been going on for the last couple of weeks, because this is a really substantial change to the regulatory program. And understanding the consequences of complying through track 1 and track 2 can be very complicated and nuanced. So we're doing our best to help growers understand these really complicated new requirements and make the best decision for their operation. So I don't know if there are any, I'm going to switch tracks to go to talk about the precedential requirements, but if there are TMDL specific questions, this might be a good time to pause for those.
Yeah, it looks like Laura has a question. Let me read it. Unless Laura, you want to ask by unmuting yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Jody. I just had a question, I guess, for track 1. So that's for an individual grower can choose track 1. It's just 2 years of showing no exceedance on their individual field. And after that, what happens if there continues to be exceedances at the monitoring site for, several years? Does the grower, is that individual grower essentially deemed in compliance like forevermore, or is there ever a point they have to resample or reevaluate track 1 or track 2 options?
Yeah, so they would, if we're talking
doesn't sound like that long in the grand scheme of all things.
Yeah. So an individual who chooses track 1, they would have to sample 4 times. So 2 wet and 2 dry for at least 2 years. They've got at least, 8 samples collected. And then if all of those samples, 2-year periods, are meeting the load allocations, then they can stop sampling, but they would have to do it, start sampling again at year 5. And then if year 5 shows, again, you are not contributing anything, you would have to just do it every 5 years. Regardless of what the representative site is showing, because in that scenario, that individual farmer ranch should be showing that they are not contributing to that exceedance.
Okay, thank you for that. I missed that part, resampling.
Any other questions on TMDL stuff?
I had posted a question earlier during the presentation. Would you like me to read it, or did you want to just respond from what I wrote?
Maybe if it's not specific to TMDLs, maybe let's wait till the end and we can take kind of general questions.
Let's see. Do you want to read it out loud? I'm sorry, I forgot your first name, but G. Nagels.
I'm George. Yes, thank
George.
you. Yeah, it is specific to TMDLs. First of all, thank you for the beautiful maps and for all that effort, sampling and graphing. I know that that represents a lot of effort going out to the field and getting those samples. I noticed that throughout our watershed, we have an emphasis on TMDLs, and I think that incentivizes minimizing discharge. I think it can be good to do, say, dry pond and wet pond and other types of treatment of that runoff before it goes to the river, and that generally is slowing the water down. But my concern is that we're dewatering these habitats, decreasing the amount of water that's available during dry periods. And I just wanted to ask you, with all the time that you spend out in the field, do you notice that trend, or do you feel like it's just not an issue? In other words, are we overemphasizing TMDLs and underemphasizing just the in-stream flow and supply of water to these habitats? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, those are all issues that are being addressed through like Sigma and the GSAs and the GSPs that they then develop. And there is some overlap between water quality and water supply kind of regulation and management. What I would say is that for the growers who are, and I think there's opportunities to address both. So, you know, addressing water quality, like you said, in many instances can be preventing discharge. So opportunities to, if it's, you know, feasible for the particular ranch to install a detention basin or to implement healthy soils practices that are gonna encourage water retention and infiltration. Those are real opportunities to address both of these issues. And that's really why we, both as VCALG and the Farm Bureau as advocates for agriculture, advocated strongly for Track 2 and really worked with both the regional board and many stakeholders in the watershed and environmental NGOs to kind of help frame what Track 2 can look like, trying to leverage the opportunity to address water quality rather than just have this insane sampling program that could be implemented everywhere. I mean, if you look at the number of growers impacted right now, these TMDLs are going to eventually impact almost the entire county. And if we have folks collecting samples at the edge of their field for everything, you know, there just isn't the laboratory capacity to handle that. But more importantly, sampling isn't going to, you know, fix the problem. So instead, having implementation focused pathway where we are focused on mitigating right out of the gate versus sampling can improve water quality at a faster rate. And many of these practices that would address water quality are also going to increase the you know, recharge rates for areas and address a lot of those water quality supplies issues as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering that question. And I would just add, I expect we can all agree that if we keep the water flowing in the river, there is the natural treatment that may help to further decrease these TMDL parameters, so that if what we care about is water quality in the river, then keeping water flowing in the river is a helpful thing. Do we agree?
Do you have a question, Peter?
Oh yeah, so Thanks, George. Thanks, Jody. Thanks, everybody else. As someone who's involved in TMDLs, or my agency is, I mean, TMDLs are really pushing agencies and growers or responsible parties to take action. Santa Clara River is like 90% undeveloped. And so, George, a lot of those flows that you're talking about are just not coming from urban or agriculture. I just want to note that a lot of that coming from open space or tributaries that are flowing that are not coming from irrigated lands, or it's a small percentage. Jody could probably talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that, but in terms of dry weather MS4 flows, we really don't discharge during dry weather. It's only wet weather, and along the Santa Clara River. And if we are discharging in dry weather for our TMDLs, as I noted earlier, it's sinking straight into the shallow groundwater and not making it to the surface water or the flows that are you know, the beneficial uses of Rec 1 and Rec 2 for bacteria. One thing I had a question though, Jody, is the bacteria TMDL has the wet weather compliance of 2029. And so after 2029 with the grouping or the management plans, are you thinking that there will be a similar letter sent from the regional board to the growers potentially in Reach 3? And then there'll be like more actions that need to be taken, and then maybe end of field sampling for each individual parcel. Or like, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, 70% is orchard, and I could imagine that bacteria coming from orchards is mostly what you thinking live in orchards, which are a lot of animals, because there's a lot of awesome things to eat in an orchard. So what are your thoughts of, is this going to be the same approach that the water board is going to take, or are you guys talking with them about what you could do at an orchards for bacteria?
So the same regulatory approach would be taken, because the way that the ag order is written is just TMDL load allocation is exceeded, discharge limitations are triggered, you have to choose track 1 or track 2. So that's going to apply whether it's like an agronomic input like nutrients, which would be fertilizer, or if it's something like bacteria, which is something that growers are obviously not adding to their field, but are coming from a lot of natural sources that you have less control over. So the mitigations required for, depending on what the TMDL constituent is the biggest unknown right now. So track 1 is very clear cut. It's you sample, you look at your results, you report to the regional board. Where there is a lot of risk of track 1 is in those constituents that are very difficult to manage. I think it's going to be really hard to demonstrate compliance with a bacteria TMDL at the edge of the field, because as you know, when wet weather, when it rains, you just have exceedances for bacteria kind of everywhere. But track 2, the uncertainty is what the regional board is going to expect in terms of mitigations. So for bacteria, if it's something that you're not contributing, so you have no source control, you know, mitigation that you could implement, it really is just a slow the flow, infiltrate kind of a approach, which there are certain ranches that might be prime for a detention basin, as costly as those can be. But other ranches, it might not be a feasible approach just because of the layout or the kind of drainage pattern of that ranch. So
that makes sense.
I think it's less clear what the mitigations for bacteria are going to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
One thing I would add is what we are really hoping to see more of is through track 2, there's almost 2 approaches that you could take as well. So you could do track 2 on your own. So an individual farmer ranch would do a managed practice plan for their farm, implement the practices, or they could work collectively in a regional project with other growers, other dischargers, you know, where there are opportunities where agricultural drainage and MS4 drainage come together and a project could come from that. That I think is where we have some of the most, the the most significant opportunity to share resources and to work together to collectively meet these compliance requirements.
That's really great. I think the city and other agencies are, you know, interested in talking with the agricultural community about that. Our deadline's 2029. It sounds like track 2 with the way that the procedures after the deadline are followed by the water board, that it's a little delayed in terms of implementation. And I didn't know that before, because you guys won't be getting a letter from the water board for individual discharges until after the TMDL compliance point has passed, and then after that monitoring season, it looks like it.
Yeah.
And so that would be like a year, and ours are waste load allocations are already integrated as enforcement action after the TMDL date, with implementation and planning that happens before it. And so it's a little bit unfortunate that that's how they set up these two regulations or types of regulations. But I think it's something that it's great to understand that now, given that it's 4 years, 4.5 years.
And I think the way we could address that though, Peter, is that we could see like, where do we have opportunities for these regional projects? Identify the land that's draining to them, you know, and like myself could definitely work as a coordinator, reach out to those landowners or growers and say, we know this deadline's going to come on this date. We know we're going to exceed it. So you're going to have to take these actions. If you do it a little early, there's opportunities to share resources and to kind of combine, you know, put our heads together and put our money together to address this by doing it early. So I think there's a case that could be made if it's structured right, where it would be an advantage to taking that early action in order to save money and cost and expense, and potentially land that you would have to take out of production. A lot of benefits could come from that.
No, I think that's excellent and a great idea. Look forward to talking to you more in the future about that.
Cool. Okay, I will keep going. I think I've just got a couple more slides talking about the precedential requirements for nitrogen tracking and reporting. So this is the other really big change that came with the ag order. It's also a change that is being phased in and implemented throughout the state. So these requirements, I actually may have a slide on this. So these requirements came from the State Water Resources Control Board. In 2018, they intervened in the East San Joaquin waste discharge requirement for that East San Joaquin sub-watershed in the Central Valley of California. And in their in the WDR that the State Water Resources Control Board issued, they said the following requirements must be precedential for all irrigated land regulatory programs throughout the state within the next 5 years. So that landed on 2023, and that's why this was incorporated into our ag order at that time. And these precedential requirements focus on addressing nitrogen in surface and groundwater through comprehensive irrigation and nutrient management programs. So that includes groundwater quality trend monitoring, which is actually something that our region was a little ahead of the curve on and required under our preceding conditional waiver. So VCAL's already been doing this for a little while. Irrigation and nutrient management plan development by growers. Irrigation and nutrient management plan summary reporting has to be reported by growers for each crop that they grow. They would also have to, this is a grower specific requirement, would be to sample on-farm drinking wells for nitrates. And then VCALG would take a lot of this information that is being reported by growers and use that to develop groundwater protective formulas, values, and targets. And I'll talk through each of these briefly. So the groundwater monitoring, like I said, VCALG has been doing this for the last 5 or so years. We are fortunate enough to have some really great partnerships with other entities in the county who are already out there monitoring groundwater wells. So where we can, we work with them to share data so that we're not duplicating resources unnecessarily, and we're, you know, saving growers money in this process as well. So we work with United Water Conservation District, Watershed Protection District, the drinking water database at the state level, et cetera. We're combining kind of wherever we can get data on nitrate for wells in Ventura County, and specifically looking at those wells that are in areas underlying agricultural lands. So it's a long-term tracking of nitrate trends in those wells. And this is our most recent map. We'll be updating this coming year as well. But what you can see here, each little icon represents a well that we are tracking the nitrate trends for. Anything in blue means the concentrations of nitrate in that well are either non-detect to 2 milligrams per liter. And the level we're looking at here is 10 milligrams per liter. Nitrate as nitrogen is the drinking water standard. So anything in green is between 2 and 5. Anything in yellow is between 5 and 10. Anything in orange is between 10 and 25. So we do have a few wells here, not that many in the county, that are exceeding that drinking water standard. And then red would be anything above 25 milligrams per liter, and we don't have any of those. So what kind of picture this map is painting is that overall groundwater is looking pretty good in Ventura County. And we obviously want to take measures to keep it that way. So one of the kind of new requirements, management practices, you may call it, that growers are required to do, and this just took effect this past March, is to develop an irrigation and nutrient management plan for each crop that they grow. And this has to be developed every year. So by March of every year, they'll have to develop another plan for each year's planting, or if it's a perennial crop like an orchard, it would just be for each calendar year. And it's one INMP for each what we call a management unit. So this means it's the same crop, it's the same age, roundabouts, if you're talking orchards, and you are irrigating and fertilizing that crop the same. And there's a pre-season component to the plan. So this is going to be kind of forward-looking to say, you know, how much yield we anticipate harvesting from this crop, and how much nitrogen does that yield require to be produced, and how much irrigation do we plan on applying in this coming season. So that's your plan, and that plan needs to be based on, you know, like research derived numbers and recommendations. And because of that, the plan has to be certified. So the plan has to be developed by somebody who has the credentials to make those recommendations, those really agronomic based recommendations. So a couple ways those plans can be certified is if a grower attends a training program that we put on in conjunction with the California Department of Food and Agriculture, their fertilizer research and education program. And the training is a 6-hour training, and it's followed up by an exam. So they have to take the training, pass the exam. If they do that, then they can certify their own plans. Otherwise, they would have to work with the NRCS's technical service providers or a certified crop advisor. So once they put together the plan for kind of the forward-looking portion of the season, then there's a post-season portion of this plan as well. So that's where a grower would record their actual applications, because as much as you can kind of plan for the year, you know, growing is not an exact science. You are driven largely by, you know, temperature and rain and pest issues and a lot of issues that are outside of your control. So at the end of the year, you kind of true up to say how much nitrogen and application of irrigation water did I actually apply in my growing season, and then what was my harvest yield. And then the following March, so this will be due March 1st of 2026, and then every year thereafter, growers are required to report summary informations from those plans. And so the summary information that they'll have to report includes answering questions about the irrigation and nutrient management practices that they're implementing, the total nitrogen applied per management unit, so how many pounds of nitrogen were applied, and then the harvest yield, so how many tons of strawberries were harvested in a particular management unit. And then those numbers would be used to calculate an A value, so an applied value, and then an R value, a removed value. So that when reported to VCALG, we can say, you know, for all strawberries, what is the range of A minus R values normalized per acre? Plot that on a distribution curve and to see who would be an outlier. And the kind of outcome of this entire program is to identify those outliers and first just give them notification, because getting that feedback would drive a grower to look a little bit more closely at their fertilization program, but also to be able to provide those folks with targeted education. So anybody who would be identified as an outlier would get the notification first so that they could, evaluate those practices, but also to attend nutrient management specific education provided likely by like UC Cooperative Extension or something similar to that. And then I had mentioned the on-farm drinking well sampling. So this was a requirement that took effect last year. Any farmer who has a well that is used for drinking water had to begin sampling that for nitrate and then notifying any users of that well. And my last slide here, so just what's next? Our primary focus over the coming year is on these substantial new requirements. So TMDL-driven requirements, we're going to continue working with regional board staff to clarify those requirements and develop guidance. It's a very new thing for all parties involved. The regional board staff specifically, is still kind of grappling with how to implement these requirements. VCALG is trying to scale up so that we can help growers, and growers are also trying to understand these really complicated regulatory requirements and significant changes to the program, and then also understand what they need to do for a requirement that isn't necessarily prescriptive, because the regional board can't really say you need to do this list of management practices, but they'll say you need to do something to mitigate this water quality exceedance, and figuring out what that something is the big challenge. And building technical service provider capacity. So I think that's going to be one of our most substantial challenges as these TMDL-driven requirements begin triggering in more and more areas. Growers who choose track 2 are going to reach out to the RCD or NRCS, and they have a limited capacity to help growers. And as you saw in my previous slide, we have the recent notifications that went out to 370 folks. That's a lot of farmers that need some assistance, and building up the capacity so that we have the infrastructure to help these growers and the additional growers that will receive notification as some of these other TMDLs trigger in other areas. And then building tools and programs to help with the INMP tracking and the kind of nitrogen calculations of fertilizer is something we're working on. But lastly, I'll just mention the building out of our Clearwater program. So Clearwater is this kind of comprehensive compliance management portal that we've built with the assistance of developers with Provost and Pritchard to give growers a platform where they can track some of these more complicated regulatory requirements. They can manage their parcels. They can receive reminders of deadlines and reporting requirements, and easy reporting in a one-stop portal to track all of this. So that was a lot of information, but happy to take any questions. Oh, one question about how to get crop certification to prepare irrigation nutrient management plans. If you are a grower, you can take that training class, and you can always reach out to me and I can help connect you with that. If you're not a grower, then you would have to either go through NRCS to apply for their technical service provider program, or receive your CCA license, which is kind of a robust and extended process. But yeah, anybody who has questions like that can reach out to me and I can give you some more specifics.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jody. If there are any other questions, I know you have to leave shortly. We will be sure to get them to you and distribute them. Lynn gave you a shout out. Thank you for all the work and participation, collaboration with the growers and for the growers. But yeah, that was really great and informative. So thank you so much. There are no more questions. We can go to our next presentation. We'll be hearing from the Ventura County Resource Conservation District about our current opportunities for farmers and landowners. And if Coco or John is here, you guys can introduce yourselves and feel free to share your screen when you're ready.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Lauren. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, phenomenal. I'm gonna share screen. Let me know if you can see it. John, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome.
Looks good.
Awesome. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Coco Nakano. I am the Agricultural Environmental System Specialist here at the Ventura County RCD. John and I are going to just talk a bit today about some grant opportunities that we have for farmers and ranchers. So whether you yourself are a grower or are well connected with them, we encourage you to share these open opportunities that we have. I'll give John a quick second to introduce himself as well right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Agustin Sequa. I'm the Agricultural Conservation Specialist here at the RCD, and I focus more on the water quality ag grants.
Awesome. All right, so a bit of context, and I don't want to belabor this point because I'm sure you're all well aware of agriculture in Ventura County as it stands, but I did want to provide a little bit of context when we think about agriculture in Ventura in terms of resource conservation, be it water resources or otherwise. So a few quick numbers that I just want to share to orient ourselves. Agriculture in Ventura County is a over $2 billion industry, meaning it generates over $2 billion in gross sales. That puts us at the 10th largest agricultural producer as a county, both in the state and in the country. And agriculture as an industry employs over 42,000 people, a lot of which are born outside of the US and at least half of which are Spanish speaking only. So the reason I bring these numbers up is because really I want to highlight the weight of agriculture, both as an industry in Ventura County, but also as a good chunk of the labor force in Ventura. And so I will leave that there for you to ponder for a second. And I'm not going to read this whole list, but I also did just want to highlight some of the top crops in Ventura County, as I'm sure you're all well aware. But in case it's news to anybody, strawberry, avocados, and lemons are the top three. This is as of 2022. I believe there's a 2023 list that may be out. And so some of these may have shifted around a little bit, but for the most part, the top 10 are still pretty much unmoving. Potentially in order, they may have changed a little bit, but the numbers that I did want to highlight on this slide was the number of total farms that we do have in Ventura. It's over 2,000 different farms, as you'll see in an upcoming slide. A large majority of those are small farms as well. And then within that, relevant to this watershed group specifically, I wanted to note that within those over 2,000 farms, we have almost 96,000 acres of irrigated croplands. So I guess another quick fact that I want to share, as it relates to water resources and water demand is that agriculture uses more than half of the water demand with respect to Ventura County. It's, I think, at 56%. That remaining 30 or 45% is urban city water demand. So agriculture is taking up more than half of that water demand. And so when we think about water usage and all of that, agriculture is a huge part of it. And I'm sure you're all well aware of that, and that's why you're here. But I just wanted to kind of put that into numbers and scale that a little bit. And so, as I mentioned, the vast majority of farms in Ventura are small farms. Just under 50% are even less than 10 acres, but over 75%, over 3/4 of farms in Ventura are less than 50 acres. Within that, some fun numbers that I wanted to share. Over 92%, 92% of those are family farms. And 5% of them are organic. 5% of that total over a little over 2,000 farms. And the reason I wanted to kind of talk about size for a second is that because as we talk about, you know, resource availability, the size of a farm is very important in terms of what resources these farms can get, both financially and technically and otherwise. And so to contextualize ag a bit more, I wanted to share that. And this is where the RCD comes in. We have a variety of open grants available, that highlight a variety of different agricultural needs within the county of Ventura. There are 8 total open grants that we're going to talk about today, 8 that are currently active and open accepting applications. There's going to be a lot of information in the next 8 slides, but there is a summary slide at the end with QR codes and links and names of all of the different slides. So you can see that at the end and take a picture of that if you're interested. I believe we'll also be sending out these slides for your reference and to click all the links and things as well. But I did just want to use this opportunity to talk through the opportunities that we have specifically for our growers in Ventura County. So the first is our CUSP Drought Relief Program. So this awards farmers and growers, ranchers who fit within this eligibility criteria of being small to medium, meaning that they make less than $400,000 in annual gross revenues. If you fit within that category, you can be awarded up to $20,000 for any sort of eligible losses or expenses that were related to drought that have been incurred since 2017. So 2021 and 2022, for example, were big drought years in the majority of California. And so expenses related potentially to crop loss or to loss in market sales would all be eligible. And I did want to note that this grant, as well as the next one I'm about to highlight, are for all California farmers. So if you or anybody you know are connected to or potentially, you know, outside of Ventura, they still are eligible to apply for this grant. I am the main contact for this grant, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer and happy to take anything, you know, inside or outside of this call. And on a similar note, we have our CUSP Extreme Weather Relief Program. So this one includes things like wildfire, hail, extreme wind, anything you'd think of in terms of extreme weather that is outside of drought, but with essentially all of the same remaining parameters. So as long as you're a small to medium sized farmer in California, you can apply for up to $20,000 in eligible losses and expenses. I should note that, you know, as I've been working particularly on these 2 grants, I understand that often when you experience extreme weather, particularly when it comes to things like wildfires, expenses and losses are far beyond $20,000. And so there is the potential to reapply after 12 months of your initial $20,000 award being dispersed, to kind of account for that while still giving other folks the opportunity to apply. The next program I'm going to talk about is our Healthy Soils program. This program awards up to $200,000 for implementing eligible healthy soil practices. The purpose and goal of this program is to really focus on the sequestration of carbon, reduction of greenhouse gases, and general improvement of soil health. A lot of various applications and practices will apply. There's a few examples on the screen here, like compost application or mulching, cover cropping, variety of different things. I did want to note that this program does include a 3-year contract to monitor your healthy soil practices post implementation. And so this one is a bit of a longer term project, but it provides that financial and technical assistance in implementing these healthy soil practices for your growing lands.
This is Ventura County specific, but it also includes some neighboring counties as well, including LA, Santa Barbara, and Kern. This one is led primarily by Emily, who is currently out of office, but if you have any questions, you can contact her. John is also working on this one as well. And so you can talk to either of them about the Healthy Soil Program. And then the last one I'm going to talk about before I pass it over to John is our Organic Transition Pilot Program. So as the name suggests, we are providing both financial and technical assistance to active agricultural lands, growers who are interested in transitioning into organic practices and the certification. Part of that is a 3-year transition to prep for the certification itself. And so assisting growers who are interested in taking that transition over those 3 years is part of what this grant does. And we have a great contractor who has been doing organic transition consultations for a lot longer than we have. And so he's another resource that you will get to work with through this grant. And yeah, I guess one thing to note that I want to highlight that's on the slide is that this is very specifically for folks that are currently engaged in commercial agriculture or are planning to market their products, their agricultural products for profit after the organic certification. It's not meant for universities or research institutions, nonprofit organizations. It's very specifically for commercial ag operations. All right, and I'll pass it to you, John.
Thanks, Coco, for going over those grants. So the first grant that we have is the Water Efficiency Technical Assistant Grant. It's short for WETA. And what this grant's objective is to offer free irrigation evaluations for farmers. And that's where we go and test the distribution uniformity of the irrigation system, but we're also checking the system, like the irrigation system efficiency, just making sure it's all working properly. And we recommend this to a lot of farmers just because we know a lot of the root causes of issues and problems on farms can stem from just water related issues. So it's something I really like to offer farmers. And this is specifically just for Ventura County farmers. Next. The next grant we have is the Interactive Irrigation Management to Reduce the Leaching of Nitrogen, short for IMERLIN. We love acronyms here at the RCD. But the main goal of this grant is to install these NIM stations, what we call this little station right here. It includes a soil moisture sensor, lysimeters, ET devices, a rain gauge, a rain bucket. And then we also sample monthly your soil, leaf, and water sample for a year. And the goal of this grant is to ultimately help reduce leaching of nitrogen into the groundwater. And this is mainly for our Ventura County farmers, but to qualify, you have to be in the Calleguas Water Creek, Ventura River watershed, and the Santa Clara River watershed. Next.
The application closes tomorrow.
It does close tomorrow. So if you're really interested in that, you have to contact me as soon as possible, just because we already have a bunch of applicants, and it's a very competitive grant.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Mm-hmm. The next grant we have is the Agricultural Environmental Water Quality Assistance Grant, AQUA. And so the goal of this grant is also to reduce, to improve water quality entering the groundwater and all that. And the way we help farmers do that is by covering 60% of the material costs of irrigation management practices, cover cropping, adding a tailwater recovery system, just anything that can help improve groundwater or improve the quality of water entering the watersheds and all that will help cover 60% of that cost. And the next grant is the Conservation Agricultural Planning Grant Program, CAPG. And this is one of my favorite grants just because we get to create carbon farm plans or nutrient management plans for farms. And so we go out to the farm, we kind of talk to the farmers about what their needs are, what issues they have, and we kind of help them give them ideas of how to be more sustainable and how to approach it. In that plan, we actually write up how to actually implement all these plans and the different types of things how to approach things. So it's one of my favorite grants to do and create plans for. And then here is a summary of all of our grants that you can find more information online, or you can contact us directly to get more information.
That's a lot,
Yeah.
but thank you so much, John.
It is quite a bit of grants, so yeah. And I mean, if you guys have any questions right now, we are willing to answer them right now, or just give us an email, a call.
Yeah, leave this on the screen for a second in case anybody wants.
Yeah.
Oh,
Are there
I
any
had,
questions?
hi,
Yeah.
it's Christine Chavez with NRCS. Hi, everybody. I just recently moved here and I do outreach for NRCS. And I was just wondering, what are some of the ways that you're publicizing I mean, these are great opportunities for farmers. So I was just wondering some of the way that you're getting the word out. And if I could be of any assistance, please look us up. And we'll be seeing you very soon also, so.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. We do really heavily lean on our conservation partners to spread messages, back and forth. And so not only, do we have our conservation partners, including NRCS and Farm Bureau, et cetera, but I've also been doing some outreach in farmers markets and trying to get connected to farmers in the ways that, in ways that they're interacting as to the community as businesses as well. John, I don't know if you want to chime in. We also have a listserv of our own that we've been growing specifically for growers to kind of share these opportunities, but we are open always to collaborating in terms of outreach. We are trying to continue to expand that side, especially as we grow the number of agricultural grants and opportunities that we have. Consolidating and keeping the grants that we have open and available up to date and available to our partners to share within their own networks is something that we want to continue to focus on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great opportunity here. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
We'll also include like all of these links in our follow-up email about this meeting. And, obviously you can visit the VCRC website, but yeah, so in the immediate, like you can access some of these links there.
Yeah. Awesome. And then this is just our thank you slide. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you have any questions, we'll be on here for a little bit longer, but otherwise appreciate your time and thanks for letting us have the opportunity to share, Lauren and Heidi.
Yeah, thank you. Oops. Yeah, so they'll be on here if there's like any questions that come up, and we'll be sending those resources out to everyone, and please distribute them. Obviously, like one is closing tomorrow, but many of them will still be open, and then there's always cycles of grants very similar to this rolling through the RCD. So on our end, from our coordinator updates, I wanted to mention that our next meeting is going to be only in person at the United Water Conference Room on June 26th. It's going to be from the normal time from 9 to 11. Maybe we'll keep the room open until 12 in case people want to talk together and have some time to speak more casually and collaboratively. But the purpose of this next meeting is to be a collaborative session to touch base with, there's emphasis on our financial contributors joining this meeting. We're going to review the draft charter and work towards a finalized document and government structure. And we'll be doing some visioning for the group, identify some areas for priority updates, address our meeting flow, and outline where we'd like to go with the committee from here. So I'm going to pull up the draft charter to show you all real fast. Let's see. Okay. Can you all see this? So this is what I have drafted so far. Like we've mentioned in the past, it is mirroring the Ventura River Watershed Council Charter. So we have the purpose up here, our mission, and then we go into the scope of powers and a list of strategies. number 2 would be an easy one to note, like facilitate communication between public, private, and nonprofit stakeholders, provide a forum for collecting, sharing, and analyzing information. But basically all of this is up to, up to review. So I'm going to send this out to everyone to provide feedback on, and I would request that you review it before our next meeting and be ready to provide feedback. And then I'm starting to compile some notes of ideas that might be important and pertinent to this watershed, such as how do we cross-pollinate with the upper watershed more regularly? Do we set up meetings with them like once a year, or do they provide updates at each meeting, up to discussion? And then we're going to address our the members and the committees. And so the idea so far is that we're going to touch base with our financial contributors, and I've listed out how they're split up here. As of now, we have 6 representatives that pay into this group that fit under the government category, 3 under water and sanitary, 2 under environmental, and 2 under business and landowner. I'm not sure if anyone's from the Nature Conservancy here, but I wasn't sure if the Nature Conservancy should go under landowner as a category in general, but that again is up to discussion. And then that goes into, the concept of forming a leadership committee. And so there is this purpose overall to ensure a balance of perspectives and interests and make sure they're represented in our committee's decision making. So I've added, let's see, also public community members to this. Again, these are just ideas, but I think it would be interesting to have involvement from our financial contributors, but then leave it open to people who are not paying members and have them participate in kind of ways written into this document. And so I would hope that we can have more representatives maybe in the environmental sector, and land management, recreation, and then maybe even if a general community member is interested. And then it goes into kind of the details of that and responsibilities. And this is empty right now. I have contacts for people who are paying members, but is there anyone here as of now that is a representative from the city of Santa Clarita that would be available and interested in attending this meeting? I know there's a few of you here today, but our contacts kind of shift. So I'm taking feedback for who might be interested in coming to the June 26th meeting. Is anyone, I can open the participant list to see as well. Or maybe you can, Heidi, because I'm screen sharing.
Yeah, I can see it. I don't see anyone raising their hand right now.
Okay, that's okay. I think maybe we don't have so many right now, but so I think it's Santa Clarita Valley Water. We had a few people from there.
Yeah, you can put this is Rick Vasilopoulos. You can put me under the primary for that. I'm not sure who an alternate would be at this point.
Okay, thank you, Rick. You also responded to the poll I sent out, so I appreciate that. And this doesn't have to be set in stone, but it'll at least help, contacting people in the immediate. Everything is up to discussion at the end of the day.
Sounds good.
All right, and then this honestly was probably going to be Jody.
Yeah.
All right, and then there's room for people who are not paying into this group. Anyone in this meeting is welcome to come to this in-person meeting on June 26th. But it's a request to just come prepared with some feedback on what this draft charter can look like. And then
And also, I mean, even provide feedback on
Yeah.
like beyond the charter, just like how you would like to see the group set up and maybe provide ideas on what kind of representation you want to see and like how we should go about it. So this would kind of be like an invitation to join that discussion and come up with strengthening our group.
Great. And I will do some outreach after this meeting. I know some of you have already sent your interest to me as well, so we'll be in some like communication. And then, yeah, there's just some long details, so I'll send this out in our follow-up meeting. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else.
And I guess it might be important to just reiterate that if you're not a financial contributor, but you are interested in like being on this committee to raise your opinions and weigh in on the direction of the group, you are more than welcome to attend as well, like Lauren said.
Yeah, let me pull up the RSVP link for the next meeting so that you can all have it right now. And then I'll send it in the chat. Okay. Here is the RSVP to the next meeting, and it will be in person at United Water Conference Room. Great.
Did you put it in the chat? Because I don't see it.
Oh, I just sent it to Lara. Oops, thanks for checking. Okay. Maybe group chat.
And does anyone have any other updates to share?
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to meet in person with whoever comes and yeah, work on, how we can collaboratively talk about this group. I know that there's like the Ventura River Watershed Resilience pilot project happening right now, and I think it would be really great for this watershed committee to get to a place where we would be able to apply for that once it becomes like no longer a pilot program with the Department of Water Resources. And I will be following up with a list of questions and just like some basic homework for people to review before the next in-person meeting. Thank you very much, and we'll see you then.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.